Welcome to the Full Monty and a Cup of Joe podcast. Monty, how are you doing today?
I'm great, Joe. Great to see you again. How are you?
I'm doing well. Today we're going to do a preview of Kansas State football in 2024. We're a week away from the season, actually 6 days away from the start of the season. So it's a good time to do this preview. What I thought we'd do is kind of do a rough overview of what K-State has coming back. They are picked to be one of the contenders to win the Big 12 and to make the college football playoffs. So that's pretty exciting. So I'll just kind of break down what they have coming back. And then I thought we would kind of go through the schedule game by game and kind of give our predictions on what we think is going to happen. Sound good to you?
Sounds great. Let's do it.
All right, so obviously the guy that's making the most news and the most waves in college football around K-State right now is the quarterback Avery Johnson. We saw him a little bit last year in relief of Will Howard, who transferred over to Ohio State, and he's at Ohio State starting quarterback now. So both these guys are gonna be Heisman Trophy contenders. They're expecting a lot out of Avery Johnson. We've seen, he's a great athlete. He's a 4 or 5 star talented quarterback that's a recruit, and he can light it up. So that's exciting. We've got a new offensive coordinator, Connor Riley, who was the offensive line coach last year. He got promoted to offensive coordinator. And we've got Matt Wells, who came in as co-offensive coordinator, and he's the ex-coach at Texas Tech. He started his career at Utah State, and that's exciting to have him in the fold too. So we've got 2 new people running the offense. It was Colin Klein last season, and he went to Texas A&M. So we've got 2 new offensive coordinators in the mix. So it'll be interesting to see, how this offense looks different than it did last year. We've got, a lot of real good skill position players. We've got DJ Giddens back. He had over 1,200 yards rushing last year and 10 touchdowns. And Dylan Edwards transferred over from Colorado. So he'll be helping out in the backfield too. Wide receiver looks pretty good with Jaden Jackson, Chase Brown, and Keegan Johnson. The offensive line is kind of a question because they've lost a lot of talent. So the offensive line is a question, but I think we'll be solid out there because Chris Klimate's always had a solid offensive line ever since he came to K-State. So I think they'll be solid there.
Can I interrupt you there for a second?
Yeah.
Your offensive line coach is moving to offensive coordinator. Is he going to be handling that offensive line still, or has he replaced his offensive line coach?
He is still running the offensive line.
That's a lot. That's
a lot, right?
That's a lot on one plate to try and coordinate what's going on with coaching that offensive line and managing the offensive play calling. That could be interesting.
Yeah, the whole situation is going to be interesting with Matt Wells coming in and how they're going to work together. I think Connor Riley's going to call the plays and with input from Matt Wells. So that whole dynamic is going to be interesting. They make Connor Riley the offensive coordinator, and he's still running the offensive line. And then they bring in Matt Wells, and they call him the co-offensive coordinator.
Right, they got so many coaching positions now that between all the advisors and whatever, there's no telling who's doing what anymore.
Yeah.
But go ahead. I'm sorry to interrupt.
No, that's good. But yeah, that's a good question. And we're going to find out how that works. And, I think at the beginning of the season, there's going to be some hiccups along the way as they learn to work with each other and figure out how to be successful. Once they get that comfort level, I think it'll be, a well-oiled machine. So we'll see how that works out. Defensively, they've got a lot of talent returning. This defense was ranked number 2 in the Big 12 last year, and they've got some talent coming back. Austin Moore and Desmond Purnell at linebacker, and Austin Romaine is back. Safeties, Marcus Siegel and VJ Payne are both back, and they're all both of those guys are all Big 12 caliber safeties. Cornerback, you've got Jacob Parrish, who is an all Big 12 caliber cornerback, and then Keenan Carver. Defensive line, you've got Brendan Mott and Uso Stihomalo at nose guard. So those guys are all back off the second rated defense in the Big 12. I think they're going to be pretty solid defensively. Offense and defense were both ranked second in the Big 12 last year. And with all these returners, that's why K-State is expected to make some noise in the Big 12 this year. And it's one of the contenders to win it all.
Yeah, looking at that Big 12, I was looking through it earlier, and it looks like a lot of teams really have a legitimate shot at it this year. There's a few teams down there that you could probably kind of rule out right off the bat, but looks like you've kind of got a little bit of a log jam almost there between the top 5 or 6 in the Big 12 that could really be a toss-up almost among the top, at least top third of the conference. So it's going to be interesting to see it play out. It's one of the more interesting conferences, I think, top to bottom, with the parity between all the schools. There's not really a runaway favorite right now, and there's not really anybody that you can look at and say is going to completely bomb. You know, obviously Colorado's fighting through whatever issues they're fighting through. So I guess as an outsider, not overly familiar with the Big 12 as far as following on a day-to-day basis. Just from the outside, I'd say Colorado kind of seems to be, you know, maybe the worst team in the Big 12, but with your top 4 or 5 there, it seems like it could really, you know, be a crazy situation here late November.
Well, obviously, we've got Oklahoma and Texas that went to the SEC, and the 4 Pac-12 schools that came in: Arizona, Arizona State, Colorado, and Utah. Utah's another favorite to win the league, but I think there's no clear favorite. The talent level among the teams is more even than it has been in the past. Texas and Oklahoma, they were recruiting top 5 recruiting classes in the country, and no other Big 12 school is even close to that. So I think, like you said, there's probably 5 or 6 schools that have a shot at this: K-State, Utah, Arizona, probably Iowa State, and maybe even KU, and then Oklahoma State. I think those are the 6 that are going to make a run at this thing. It'll probably be in it until mid-November. We'll see how that plays out.
Looking at the schedule right off the bat, the first 2 games there, I don't think, obviously, not to knock UT Martin, but I don't see that being an issue for K-State. That should be a tune-up, really, for a team as experienced as K-State is, with a coaching staff that's been together as long as they've been together. My biggest concern going into that UT Martin game would be injuries. And, you don't want to not start your starters. That's never a good idea, because then you could put yourself in a position where you really do have to scramble against the UT Martin, and you could wind up in trouble. But, you should be able to, you'd like to think anyway, a home game, 6:00 at night in Manhattan, you'd like to think that about halfway through the third quarter, you can start cycling in some of those at least second stringers, and maybe even some of the third string guys when you start talking about your skill players like your quarterback or, wide receivers and running backs, things like that. Get those guys in there, get them some playing time, because you may wind up needing them later in the year. One of the games that kind of concerns me right here off the bat, looking at the early season, is that game at Tulane. The Tulane game in Manhattan was surprising. Tulane came up on the other end of that one and upset the Cats. But that Tulane team, if I'm correct, I believe that Tulane team went on to have an 11-1 or 10-2 season that year. Can't quite remember, but I know that was a good Tulane team. That wound up being a pretty good Tulane team. But when you're traveling down to, New Orleans, Louisiana, and Tulane's kind of been on the upswing here the last few years, those fans are going to be excited. And I see, looking here, the information I've got right now is that showing as an 11 a.m. Central Time game. For whatever reason, I thought that was scheduled as a night game down in New Orleans. I don't know why I was thinking that. Maybe I accidentally looked down and saw the Arizona game at 7, but for some reason I was thinking that Tulane game was a night game. But I see it here. It's 11 a.m. Central Time. That could be scary. That could be a game that you got to watch out for. What do you think about that Tulane game?
Oh, that scares me for sure. Tulane was undefeated in their conference last year. They're in the AAC and 11-3 overall. They lost in the AAC championship game, and then they lost to Virginia Tech in the Military Bowl. So
So
this is
that
a
was
good
last
team. That
that
was
was
last
last
year.
year,
Yeah.
Tulane. Okay, I couldn't remember. I got confused. I couldn't remember if that was last year or 2 years ago that Tulane came to Manhattan.
It was 2 years ago. They did beat K-State in Manhattan.
But last year, so now 2 years ago they were good also though.
Yeah. Mm-hmm.
So Tulane's been good.
And then their head coach, Willie Fritz, he left, and then he went to Houston. So they have a new head coach, John Summerall,
Okay.
who was Troy's head coach last year. So he's coming in, but they're going to be good. They've got some talent. So I do not like it that it's on the road at all.
No, anytime you go on the road, you gotta be a little bit extra. You got to bring your A game for every game, but especially on the road, because it's just an advantage for anybody, for any team. Whoever's at home always has that home field advantage, and you're like you said, you're going against a good Tulane team already. Yeah, with a new coach, I was unaware of that. That wasn't in my mind at the moment, but you'd like to think that a guy, in his first year, he doesn't have everything together, doesn't have all of his pieces in place with a team like K-State that's as solid as they are, that's as well built around their nucleus as they are. You'd like to think that they could handle that one on the road, but I don't think that's a gimme at all.
No, it's not a gimme for sure. And I think that the fact that there is a new coach in there and he'll be still implementing his systems, that's an advantage for K-State right there.
Yeah,
Because
exactly.
Climate's been here a while, and he's got this thing rolling. So if it wasn't for that, the game would really scare me, and I might even predict a loss. but
Sure. Yeah. If this
uh,
was, yeah, if Tulane was just rolling along, yeah, it might really be ugly, or not ugly,
mhm,
but really scary.
yeah. So I think K State starts out 2-0. Got UT Martin next Saturday, and then at Tulane the following week. And then here's a weird one. Arizona, the following week on a Friday night. Fox is doing the Friday night Big 12 football games now, and they picked Arizona and K State for the first one. And this is going to be a non conference game because this was scheduled long before Arizona decided to come into the Big 12. But Arizona's good. And this scares me because it's a Friday night. I'm glad it's at home. I give K State the slight edge in this one just because of home field advantage. And to be honest, I don't know how good Arizona's going to be, but they're picked as one of the contenders to win the league. They were 10-3 last season, 7-2 in the Pac-12, and they beat Oklahoma in the Alamo Bowl. I don't know how much bowl games that aren't playoff games. I don't know how much stock you can put into them anymore, but they still beat Oklahoma, and they finished the season ranked number 11 in the AP poll. So they're a good team, and that's going to be tough.
Friday the 13th, if you're superstitious,
Yeah.
I don't know how superstitious you are. I'm sure you've heard the expression we all have, don't let a team beat you twice. Don't lose to a team twice. What I mean by that is we're saying that we think K-State can go to New Orleans and pull off the win against Tulane. However, if you fail to get that victory down there in New Orleans against the Green Wave, then you've got 6 days rest, and you're coming home on Friday night, an odd kind of time to play Arizona. So that Tulane game, you don't want to lose that Tulane game. That's another reason you really don't want to lose that Tulane game, is because you don't want to have that hangover on Friday night, the 13th, with Arizona coming in. Because a team like Arizona, they're going to be able to exploit whatever weakness they can. They're not a pushover. They're not a doormat. They're going to come in and they're going to fight. And it not being a conference game, I don't know that that plays into it at all for the players. It plays into it for the conference because I'm guessing that that's not going to affect your conference win-loss record. That happened a couple of
Right.
years ago in the ACC, and you have to forgive me. I could look it up and tell you who it was, but right now I can't remember. It was Wake Forest and someone. I think maybe NC State. I'm not sure, but they played twice in the same year. One of them was a conference game. One of them was a non-conference game. So the non-conference game didn't have any bearing on the conference standings. So that part of it is one aspect, but watch out for that Tulane game. Let's get that win down in New Orleans, and that puts you on a lot better footing for that Arizona game on that Friday night. So it's critical. K-State's first, like that UT Martin game, I don't think is overly critical, but those first two games, Tulane and Arizona, those are both going to be huge. And if K-State can come out of that 3-0 heading to Provo, that's big. That's going to put K-State in a very good position if they're going to BYU undefeated September 21st.
And if K-State wins those 3 games, they're possibly in the top 10.
Yes.
You don't know exactly, but they could be in the top 10 by that time. So,
well, by that point in time, you're going to have enough fallout throughout the rest of college football where you're going to have a couple of people. You've already had one top 10 team get knocked off. Florida State got knocked off yesterday, the last minute field goal by Georgia Tech. So I'm sure, with 2 more Saturdays between, or actually 3 more Saturdays between now and that BYU game, there's going to be all kind of upheaval and mayhem, at least in the top 20. So yeah, if K-State can pull through that 3-0 heading to BYU September 21st undefeated, it should definitely be, you would like to think anyway, a top 10 K-State team.
Arizona has a new coach too. So their coach, Jed Fish, went to Washington when Washington's head coach went to Alabama. So Arizona's going to have a new head coach too, and it's Brent Brennan from San Jose State. So that'll be interesting too. I like it that, again, it's a new coach, implementing a new system, and that gives K-State a little bit of an advantage in that game. Not only that it's a home game, but because of that. So
now here's a question to just throw out there at you real quick. With those first 3 games being a home game against UT Martin, and then a game against Tulane and Arizona, both with new head coaches, regardless of the results, do you really know anything about K-State after those 3 games? Or at what point do you get to in your schedule where you say, okay, now we know who this team is? You're going against UT Martin to start the season off. And like I said, not to impugn UT Martin or knock them, but I mean, it is UT Martin. K-State should not have any problem with UT Martin. You would like to think certainly that K-State shouldn't have any problem with UT Martin. If they do, then we've got bigger issues. But with Tulane and Arizona both having new coaches, what do you know about K-State after those first 3 games?
Yeah, you may not know a lot yet. That's a good point. But this isn't a cupcake schedule. I mean, UT Martin, it doesn't look good at first glance, but they're a good team. Tulane is a good team. They've been a good team over the last few years. So, but again, it's not a, wow, you beat Tulane, it's not even if it's on the road, you don't really get too excited about it. That Arizona game, yeah, it's a big game, but are they going to get a lot of publicity if they be, are they going to lead off Sports Center if they beat Arizona? No. It's just like, well, K-State's supposed to do that at home. So yeah, you're right. We may not get a real good view of K-State in those first 3 games, but it's important that they go undefeated in those 3. I do think if they beat Arizona, and depends how that game goes, but if they beat Arizona, I think you can say, well, K-State is going to be contending for the Big 12 because Arizona's a good team and they're one of the contenders. So I think you could say that much. But the confidence level at that, yeah, that could be a question.
Yeah, I think if K-State comes out and has a comfortable victory against Tulane and even a close victory against Arizona, and you'd like to think a very comfortable victory against UT Martin, even though they are good for their level of football, then yeah, you do definitely have some well-earned confidence going into your fourth, fifth, sixth, seventh games. The flip side of that is certainly, like we mentioned, you don't want to go to New Orleans and come out of there with an L, and you don't really want to go toe to toe with Arizona down to the wire at home in a night game. Although that may be what happens
Right.
with that game, because like we said, I mean, Tulane and Arizona, neither one are jokes. They're not jokes. They're both legit programs, and they've both shown that in previous years. Coming through that stretch undefeated, that would be a pretty good accomplishment, especially if you come through that stretch undefeated and uninjured. If you come through that stretch undefeated with your starting 22 still intact, then it sets up very nicely for the rest of your schedule.
So then we've got at BYU. BYU was 2-7 last year in the conference, 5-7 overall. I don't really know a lot about them, but they'll be at the bottom half of the league again. Traditionally, they're a good program, but they really struggled in their first year in the league. I have no reason to, even though it's a road game, I don't have any reason to think K-State will go in there and get a loss.
I don't think so either, barring something catastrophic. I wouldn't think that BYU should be too insurmountable of a challenge for K-State. I think they should be able to take care of them. Yeah. I would give that to K-State. Were I a betting man.
And then we've got Oklahoma State, and this is always a good game with the Cowboys and Wildcats. It's a home game.
That's going to be a firecracker. That's going to be a firecracker of a game right now. You were talking. I don't know who all else is playing that weekend. I don't have the entire schedule in my head or up in front of me, but you were talking about Sports Center or Game Day, whatnot. If you got an undefeated K-State and an undefeated Oklahoma State playing at the Bill, I mean, that would be a pretty decent game day option. That would definitely be a big game. I would think that an undefeated K-State and an undefeated Oklahoma State would certainly be one of the marquee games of that weekend were it to play out that way.
I think if K-State does beat Arizona and then 2 weeks later they're still undefeated and they beat Oklahoma State, then they're, I think they're the front runner, depending on how Utah's doing at the time. The 2 of the first 5 games are playing 2 contenders in the Big 12. So, yeah, Oklahoma State, it'll be a tough game, but I think K-State will have the kinks worked out in the offense by then, and I think they'll be running pretty good by this game, and so I think K-State will probably get the victory.
5-0 at that point in the season would definitely be an impressive mark going into an off week, another off week there. So they got those 2 off weeks, right? Yeah, they got an off week after Arizona, and they got an off week after Oklahoma State. So then you go to Colorado, and I think Colorado is going to come to a realization here pretty soon that they may need to go in a different direction. I think Shedeur Sanders is an outstanding athlete. I think there's a chance that he could be the overall first-round draft pick, or definitely the overall number 1 draft pick, or at least a first-round draft pick. I think he's a heck of a athlete. I think he's a great quarterback, and he's got some great skills. I'm not really sure that Colorado is put together very well. Excuse me, I'm sorry. I'm not really sure that Colorado is put together very well administratively from the top down. And I don't want to throw a lot of mud on Deion Sanders. I I'm not very confident in that decision as a head coach. I would have not been happy to have seen him, say, brought to South Carolina, for example. I would have hoped for the best and certainly would have pulled for him. And I think Colorado's embraced him. I think he's given them some positive energy around their program, but I don't see it lasting. I think that, and I hate to say this, but I think that it's a lot of smoke and mirrors with Dion right now. And I don't see there being any lasting success there at Colorado. And I think this year is really going to reveal that for Colorado. And I wouldn't be surprised. Again, I wouldn't bet money on it, but I really wouldn't be surprised to see Colorado pull a 3-9 or a 4-8.
Yeah, me either. I think they're going to struggle.
And I hate that for the kids. I just feel like from the news that's come out of Boulder with trouble and mayhem in the locker room, with dissension among teammates, fighting, you just can't have
Sounds like
things
there's a drug and gun culture there in the locker room.
Yeah, it does. It does. The little bit of stuff that's leaking out of Colorado does not sound good. And were I a Colorado fan, I would not be very happy about it. I think the intent of bringing Dion in as the coach was well founded and good. I think it was a great idea. I think it was great to give it a shot. But like I said, I don't see that being a lasting solution. And I think initially it was a good bit of smoke and mirrors. And I think we're going to start to see the real Colorado here this year, which I think is going to be a 3-9 or a 4-8 team.
Yeah, I agree with you there. So then after Colorado, the next week it's at West Virginia. And this is the first loss I'm predicting for K-State. West Virginia really turned it around last year. They were 6-3 in the conference, which is the same as K-State was. And I think they're turning it around. And this is going to be a tough one. Again, we don't know. Right now, we're just kind of predicting how good they're going to be. So, but right now on paper, this looks like one of the toughest games on the schedule to me.
Who does West Virginia play next weekend? And I've got notes here and I'm trying to go through. West Virginia has a couple of big, or at least has one big out of conference game. And I think it's next weekend. Who is it? Is it Penn State, or because I know they play Penn State somewhat regularly.
Yeah, might be.
Who is it they've got coming up? They've got somebody on their schedule. Let me see here if I can pull it up. I know they've got a couple of big tests. Yeah, they got Penn State next week in August 31st.
Okay.
And not really too much more in the non-conference after that. They've got Penn State and they've got Pittsburgh. Common opponents. The first common opponent is Kansas, but you play Kansas after West Virginia. They play Oklahoma State, so you'll be able to see Oklahoma. You'll be able to see the West Virginia Oklahoma State as a common opponent before playing West Virginia. So that might give you a little bit of something to go off of there. West Virginia is one of those teams where I would not want to go to Morgantown. I don't care how good my team was or what kind of year they were having. Anybody out there raising cane and burning couches. I mean, man, those guys, they know how to party in West Virginia. They do. They get down. My daughter went to Pitt, so she can tell you all about the rivalry there between Pitt and West Virginia. I think what they got a name for it. I don't even know what it is now. It's not the Civil War. That's somebody else. But Pitt and West Virginia is a nasty game, and Morgantown can be a hard place to play. If West Virginia is good and if they're rolling and clicking, I mean that's a tough one. That's a big ask, especially you're coming off of Arizona at BYU, Oklahoma State at home, and at Colorado, and then you're going to West Virginia. That's a lot. That's a lot, and that might be one that gets the Cats.
Yeah, I'm predicting a loss there, so I'm at 6-1 right now, going into the next week, which is the KU game, which you're coming to.
I am. I will be there for the Kansas game, and I would never schedule my arch rival as homecoming. I just I don't I think that's just kind of maybe agitating a little bit there, poking the bear a little bit, so to speak. This Kansas team down here, I say down here just for reference, so everybody knows I'm in South Carolina. So the overwhelming majority of radio chatter that I hear pertains to either the South Carolina Gamecocks or the Clemson Tigers or the SEC/ACC. So we don't get a lot of everyday news about the other conferences and what's happening and what's going on. Having said that, even our local guys, local to Columbia, our flagship Gamecock broadcasting station, even those guys have been talking about Kansas. There's a lot of chatter nationwide about Kansas and the job that Leipold's done there with them. And as much hate as exists between Kansas State and Kansas, and believe me, I understand it with the hate between South Carolina and Clemson, Kansas is not the old Kansas. And eventually the law of averages has to apply. 14 in a row. What are we up to? 15 now? Is it 15 after last year?
Yeah.
That's a lot. That's a lot. And you're talking about, like I kind of mentioned earlier, don't let a team beat you twice. If you go to West Virginia and if the Mountaineers take one from you in West Virginia, and if you come home that next Saturday the least bit flat against Kansas, who's been on the upswing here for the past couple of years, that one might be bad. And I myself have a 1-1 record at Manhattan at the Bill. I suffered the loss to Iowa State a couple of years ago and got the victory last year with Central Florida. So next year will be my tiebreaker. And I'm hoping for a cat win there against the Jayhawks. But Joe, I'm not going to lie. If someone forced me to put money on it right now, for whatever reason, I feel like I'd bet Kansas. And I hate to say that because I desperately want to see the Cats win.
Well, don't put money on it because you don't know if Jalen Daniels is going to be playing or not.
Right.
Because he can't stay healthy.
And you don't know who's going to be healthy or unhealthy. You never do. And don't get me wrong, I'm no Kansas fan, but like I said here, I'm kind of playing the law of averages, and eventually the blind dog does have to find a bone, right? So I don't know. I got an icky feeling about that one. I'm certainly pulling for the Cats, but if I was forced to call that one right now, personally, I think I would call Kansas in that one.
All right. Well, I'm not picking Kansas until they show me they can do it. They every year they're playing that law of averages, like you said. Well, that's going to have to even out eventually. Well, it hasn't for the last pretty long period of time. And hey, with the Jalen Daniels question mark, if he stays healthy, if he's healthy in that game, definitely you can win that. But at this point, I can't predict it. I don't think he's going to play all season. I just think he's injury prone. And for that reason, I don't, at this point, I can't pick. We'll talk about it more the week of that game. But as of right now, I can't predict that Kansas is going to win.
Sure. No, there's a lot that can happen between now and October 26th. And like I said, I'm certainly pulling for K-State. Our guys down here on our local sports radio station, they've even gone as far as to say that Kansas K-State game is the Big 12 championship. And
I don't agree with that at all.
Well, you never know. Me personally, I would love to see an undefeated K-State versus an undefeated Kansas in that game. That would be, you want to talk about game day, you want to talk about a hate fest. Woo wee, man! If you had an undefeated KU and an undefeated K-State there, that would be a barn burner for sure.
Yeah. Mm-hmm. So that'll be interesting.
I think K-State can take care of Houston.
They're another one that struggled the first year in the league. They were 2-7 last year and 4-8 overall. Willie Fritz came in as their coach, like we mentioned, from Tulane. So he's a good coach. He's going to get it turned around eventually, but I think he's going to struggle in this first year.
Yeah, I think that's a K-State game, and I think Arizona State's a K-State game too. I feel like Houston and Arizona State. I don't think that the Cats will struggle very hard there. Not personally.
Yeah, me either. And
Because
then we've
that's
got
a,
Cincinnati. So this stretch is probably, well, it is. It's K-State's easiest stretch of the season. You've got at Houston, Arizona State, and then Cincinnati. So I think they'll take care of Cincinnati. Cincinnati's another one. They were a newcomer last year and they struggled. They went 1-8. So
yeah, that'll be a K-State game, and then you
so
got the
I've got them 10-1
Cyclones.
going into that last game of the season against Iowa State. And this is another one that I predicted as a loss. I still have nightmares from that snow game last year where K-State couldn't stop Iowa State at all. And this one's in Ames. And I just can't predict with all with the unknowns that K-State has going into the season. I can't predict an undefeated record or anything like that. I think 10-2 is about right, and I think this is going to be one of their two losses. So I've got losses at West Virginia and at Iowa State. Now, whether or not that record is going to be good enough to get into the Big 12 championship game, that I don't know, and nobody knows that at this point. It'll put them in contention, and really, if they are 10-1 going into that game, they're probably playing for a spot in the Big 12 championship game.
Yeah, yeah, you'd like to think so. I don't see K-State looking past Iowa State if there's a
No.
chance for them to make it to the Big 12 game. I don't see that happening. But I think K-State can beat them in Iowa. I feel like K-State can win that if they're
They
if
can, yeah.
if K-State's trending up right there. Let's say I'm wrong, and I very sincerely hope I am wrong. Let's say K-State comes out of that Kansas game with a win, and a win against Houston, a win against Arizona State, a win against Cincinnati. You're coming on a 4-0 run right there, and you're setting yourself up for the Big 12 championship. I don't see K-State slipping right there and looking past Iowa State to the Big 12 championship game. If anything, I see them getting more hyped up and more amped. And if they come through Kansas, Houston, Arizona State, and Cincinnati, if they come through there 4-0 undefeated, then I say they go into Ames and they come out with a win on their way to the Big 12 championship.
All right.
If they can pull off that Kansas win.
Right.
Is. And a lot to me, a lot hinges on October 26th. That could be a weekend that turns the season around, and that West Virginia game. You don't want to lose any game, but if you come out of West Virginia with a win, and then you come out of the Kansas game with a win, I mean, KD bar the door. There's no telling where we're going after that. It could be something really special. But
yeah,
that's the nature of the game, and that's why we play it. Every weekend is to wait for the surprises and see what happens. So,
yeah,
I think what we're saying either way is that we should, barring anything catastrophic or unpredicted, I feel comfortable saying we should be looking at a 10-2 or a 9-3 K-State team at the end of the year.
Yep, I agree with you. And I think the best case scenario is they can run the table. And I rarely say that. Normally when I predict K-State's record, I either get it on the dot or I'm a game or two off either way. And I don't think I've ever predicted them to go undefeated. But with this schedule, like I said, the talent level between these teams is pretty even. And I think with the coaching, with the skill position players K-State has coming back, with the defensive players they have coming back, they can win every game.
I agree with you.
I can't even really believe I'm saying that, but they can win every game now. They can lose a lot of these games too. But to be able to say they could be favored in every game.
They could be.
If they start out fast, they beat Arizona. And who knows against that? Again, Oklahoma State, they're going to have that home field advantage. They could be favored in that one. And if they keep that thing going, they may be favored in every game.
Well,
We just don't know. So.
it's predicting the unknowns
Right.
is what it is. When you look at every game individual as 12 individual pieces, then we can say, yes, okay, Kansas State can win if they do this, if they do that. But one of those things does affect the other. And the last thing you want to do is have that domino effect of one loss contributing to another loss because of the hangover.
Yeah.
So, Joe, let me ask you a question. K-State makes it to the Big 12 championship. Well, let's change that. K-State wins the Big 12 championship if
They only have one conference loss and they can get in there. And if Utah isn't as good as advertised, because Utah is, they're an unknown to me. They're one of the favorites in the league. Well, here's the thing. Let's say, I'll put it like this. If Avery Johnson lives up to the hype, K-State wins the Big 12 championship because there's a lot of hype around him. There's hype he might win the Heisman.
sure.
So if he lives up to that hype with I think this offense could be the best offense in the Big 12. I really believe that. And if the defense is one of the best defenses in the Big 12, then they're going to win the league.
I think looking at K-State, they've certainly got the potential. They've got the opportunity to do it. Execution is the second part of that. You don't know what the execution is going to be, but can they? Certainly. They've got the ability. Let me ask you this question. Avery Johnson aside, one player K-State cannot lose.
That's a good question. Maybe one of the defensive players, maybe Jacob Parrish, because he's a shutdown cornerback.
That's who I was thinking was one of their cornerbacks, one of their starting cornerbacks.
And they're not deep at that position. They're young at that position, but they're not deep.
One of the greatest equalizers is you can come out, you can get a big lead on somebody. You can get a 13-point lead, a 17-point lead, sometimes even a 20-point lead. And if somebody can drop back and unload one on you for 65 or 70 yards and take it to the house, and they only spend 4 or 5 seconds doing it, that's a killer. You gotta protect that defensive backfield. You can't get burned. You go in and you score, let's say right before halftime, and you got a 17-point lead on Kansas at home going into halftime, and you come back out, and the second play after halftime, KU drops a 60-yard bomb into the end zone. You can't let that happen, not just against KU, but against anyone. So you gotta. I was looking at the defensive backfield a little bit, and that's an area, those cornerbacks that you gotta really, you got to keep your stars out there on that. You got to be able to get to break up that deep ball. I mean, even if you take the PI call on that, sometimes it's almost worse, better, because it's worse just to let that guy burn you for 60 yards and 6 points. You don't want that to happen.
Yeah, that's a good question, though. Obviously, if Avery Johnson gets injured, it's horrible to say, but say he gets injured in the first game and is out for the season, this could be a 5-7 team because they just don't have another quarterback that's near what he can do. Four of the top 5 quarterbacks on the roster transferred last year. They brought in a couple of players, but they're young and have 0 experience. So, yeah, if Avery goes down, then all bets are off. Jacob Parrish, Keenan Garber, they're your cornerbacks, and hopefully they can stay healthy because, it's to keep that defense on that level, they're going to have to stay healthy and play well. So,
yeah, for sure. Yeah, you don't want any injury anywhere.
No,
but that's one that's one guy you definitely want to try and keep that jersey as clean as possible.
All right, so we're close on our predictions for K-State.
Yeah, I think either way, I think barring any kind of serious calamity or any kind of extremely unfortunate injuries or anything like that, I think we should be looking at a successful season for K-State. And I wouldn't be surprised at all to see K-State, even if whatever circumstances dictate they get knocked out of or don't make it to the Big 12 championship game. I think you're still looking at a 9-3 team with a very good bowl game and a good season. There's 142 of these teams. Only one of them can win the national championship. So, I think that you're looking at a successful, good year for K-State. Like I said, barring anything catastrophically unpredictable.
Right. Oh, I agree with you, man.
So should
Well,
be
that's
exciting.
good stuff. Yeah. It'll be an exciting year. That's for sure. I'm looking forward to it.
Oh, it always is, man. Every Saturday or Friday or Thursday, whatever day.
Yeah. Now it's Thursday and Friday and Saturday.
Sometimes Sunday, right?
Right. Yeah.
I think on Labor Day weekend, don't they play a Sunday game on Labor Day weekend usually?
Yeah, I think so. Yeah.
Yeah.
All right. Thanks, Monty. We hope everyone enjoyed our K-State preview. Please like, share, subscribe to the podcast, and we'll be back next week with more content for you. We're also recording a South Carolina podcast. If you're interested in that, be on the lookout for that. Thanks, everybody.